Thanks for being so punctual. And this is a meeting with the Alameda Backyard Growers. And it's behind the organic food label. I'm Kristen Smeal, co-president of the Alameda Backyard Growers. And today we have speaker Paige Benveniste here to speak to you. She's an Alameda neighbor and also an International Organic Inspectors Association certified crop and processing inspector. She currently works as an organic inspector for California Certified Organic Farmers, CCOF. As an organic inspector, she travels throughout the Bay Area, inspecting a wide variety of farms and food manufacturers. Prior to becoming an organic inspector, she worked on an organic farm and was a local food buyer educator at a tech campus in San Francisco. So we're really glad to welcome her here today and educate us more about that organic food label. I'm going to turn it over to Paige. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me all right? Okay, great. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about the organic food label. And as Kristen said, I am currently an organic inspector for California Certified Organic Farmers, CCOF. I feel like you might have heard of them. They're one of the bigger certification agencies in the country, and they've been around since the beginning of kind of like the organic movement and organic certification. And it's been a really wonderful job traveling, being an inspector for them. And I currently inspect all types of places. Like today I was at a coffee roaster, yesterday I was at a pistachio orchard, and last week I was at a grain processor in Woodland. So I'm really kind of going out there, and anyone that is certified organic, I just am going out and making sure they're following the rules for organic farming. And I've love agriculture. I've always been around food, and so it's like a special treat that I go out and get to do this every day. And I'm excited to share it with you all today. And so I wanted to kind of start with just to give everyone a background, because for me, I kind of walked into organic food. It's something that I've always been around. And so I wanted to give more background on kind of where it came from, how it formed into law, and then from there talking about the certification process and what it means for a farmer and a food producer to be certified organic. What are the types of rules they need to follow? And then from there, we'd like to talk about just what's changed since the organic movement first started and kind of what's happening now, because organic isn't just this static thing, it's constantly changing and growing. And so we want to talk about where we're at today and kind of what's next for organics, because it's not over, and we all as eaters and as growers still need to be active in this movement and paying attention and supporting the good people that are growing our food. And so I was kind of having a hard time kind of where I wanted to start, because what got organics growing has really kind of started earlier than the 60s and 70s, but I put that as a time for kind of more of the modern organic movement and when it got started. But it really featured some prominent names, like early 1900s, you had Sir Albert Howard, and he was an Englishman that was doing a lot of research in India with crops and was talking about cycling nutrients. And then from there in the 1940s, you had J.I. Rodale in the Rodale Institute, and that's kind of where the term organic really got popularized, and Rodale's kind of seen as like the father of the organic farming movement, and he published a lot of information about sustainable agriculture and really popularized the term organics. And it was also 60s, of course, Silent Spring by Rachel Carson that really kind of inspired kind of like the environmental movement and DDT and its impact on the environment and people, and wanting to kind of inspire people in working together to take care of the land, and humans just aren't masters controlling the land, but how do we the land work together and in our communities and people. And so it kind of inspired food co-ops and back to the land and organic farming and kind of different ways of going about how things were at the time. Because also I think it was like late 70s, the Earl Butts get big or get out. And so you had these people kind of rebelling against that. And so in the 70s, loose terms for organic, it was more about farmers getting together, kind of coming up with ideas, what organic should mean, what their practices were. And in the beginning, Rodale was like the first certification program. And then CCOF started in California by 54 farmers, kind of all coming together and deciding on what the term organic should mean and what this food should look like, which then out of there birthed the 1979 California Organic Food Act, which is like the first in the nation to kind of put into law what organic food was. So let's see. So we have, sorry, excuse me a minute. So you have late 70s, early 80s. So organic is still picking up steam. California is still the only one with the certification until 1990 that the Organic Foods Production Act passed. And within that law, it required the USDA to develop a national standard for organic agriculture. And it was to be under the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service, which was interesting to me to learn is that the word organic is a marketing term. It's just it's basically anyone who's organic, even if they're following all the practices, they then basically get a license to use the term organic. And so with this act, they kind of established the standards for organic food production and sales. And also in 1990 is when California again came up with their own California Organic Food Act. And the California Organic Food Act basically inspired what then became the federal rules for organic farming. And then with the Organic Food Production Act was the establishment of the National Organic Standards Board, which is known as the NOSB. And it's a federal advisory board that is still in place today, and it's made up of 15 public volunteers from across the country. So it's different farmers, ranchers, kind of anyone who's in organic can volunteer to be on this board. And the National Organic Standard Board helps not change the organic rules, but like make recommendations to change the organic rules or issue notices about specific kind of new guidance that happens to the organic standard, which we'll come back to because the National Organic Standard Board has had a lot to do with changes that have happened in the organic rules recently. And so let's see. So then we fast forward to 2000. That's when the final rules were written and implemented and gave us the National Organic Program Standards, which today is kind of the overseeing body of the organic program. 2002 is when accreditations and certifying begins. Accreditation is the USDA itself isn't out actually certifying farms. There's a bunch of organizations that the USDA has it accredited to be certifiers and basically implementers of the organic program. And it's tricky how to describe what has happened between now and then. And I just kind of wanted to say that like organic industry continues to grow. I think last time I looked, it was like a $62 billion industry, which is a lot. It's grown since the beginning, but still I think compared to the general food industry, it's like something small, like 2%, but it's still a lot of big business since organics first started. And kind of with the growth of the organic industry, we have what a lot of people are now kind of calling big organic, where it's like you have the Whole Foods, Walmart selling organic, the big distributors. And so it's kind of came from these like humble hippie beginnings to big business. And so that's kind of where we're at today with how to balance like the roots of the organic label, organic movement and what it meant with kind of what we have today and all the different players wanting to be a part of the organic movement. In the 2020s where we are now, thinking of as the rise of the add-on labels, where there's some people out there that feel like the organic label doesn't do enough or has had its integrity kind of chipped away at by big organic. And so there's folks out there that are making add-on labels that are kind of like, in addition to organic, here some other either farming practices or social justice practices that people want incorporated into the organic label. Okay, so that's kind of the background in history of the organic label. And so next I'm going to talk more about my job in the organic certification process and what it means to be a certified organic farmer or food processor. This is like, to me, like the hierarchy of the organic. So at the top, you have the USDA managing organic. Then under that, you have the National Organic Program Standards and the National Organic Board. And then you have accredited certifiers like CCOF or Oregon Tilth, and they're the ones actually implementing and evaluating people's compliance with the National Organic Program regulations. And then under there, you have inspectors that are on the ground, making sure that folks are doing what they say they're doing. And I put this little smiley face just to show that that's kind of where I'm going to start talking about the inspection organic certification process. Okay. And again, accredited certifiers are organizations that enforce and evaluate compliance with the National Organic Program rules. They get audited every three years by the National Organic Program. And when the USDA comes into audit, they're making sure these organizations have qualified inspectors, that they're holding out the integrity of the organic label, which means correctly enforcing the regulations and evaluating compliance. And they also do random inspection audits of certifiers. And also within that, the National Organic Program, I didn't include it here, but they're actually the ones that kind of go out and investigate organic fraud, which is not so much like taking care of on the certifier side. That's kind of where the federal government gets more involved in the USDA. And so you have the certifiers. And so then we go into the regulations. And I wanted to include this part from the National Organic Standards Board in 1995. So kind of really before they started going out and enforcing that organic agriculture is an ecological production management system that promotes and enhances biodiversity, biological cycles, and soil biological activity, minimal use of off-farm inputs, and on management practices that restore, maintain, and enhance ecological harmony. And I love this sentence because I feel like so much of organics it's being against, or not all of it, but it's like a lot of it is known for being not having as many pesticides as being against something. And with this presentation, I just kind of want to show that organics is so much more than the absence of agrochemicals. Like it really is about how do farmers see themselves and their lands as part of like a greater ecological system, like where they are and with the world. And so the nice sexy rules over here. These are the rules of the Organic Food Production Act. And I'm going to touch on some of the highlights, the ones I think that are most important and the most interesting to know about. There's a lot of boring stuff about labels and records and things like that, but I'm just going to highlight the ones that I think are a really foundational part of what it means to be certified organic. In my opinion, the two biggest rules of organic certification are that to sell organic, you must be certified. So anyone who wants to sell an organic vegetable, an organic food product needs to go through the process to become certified. There is an exception to this, that if you are a farmer who sells produce that's less than $5,000 annually, you don't need to be certified. So anyone, like if you wanted to be a home gardener and sell organic, as long as it's less than $5,000, you can say it's organic. But it stops there. If someone wants to say make a certified organic food product with your, say, carrots, it would then need to be certified organic to be used as an ingredient in someone else's product, which I will talk more about. And then again, the biggest rule is no use of prohibited materials. And so under the National Organic Program and the National Organic Standards Board, the National Organic Standards Board oversees the national list of allowed and prohibited substances. And so the list doesn't really change And the overall big picture of the list is that materials are classified into two groups. So there's synthetics, so which are man-made materials, and there's non-synthetics. And so the general rule of thumb for synthetics is that they're not allowed unless they're specifically listed as approved. And so up over on the right, I gave the example of Roundup, glyphosate. It's a synthetic. And if you look in the rules, it does not list glyphosate as being approved. So therefore, you cannot use it in organic production. To the right of the Roundup, I have a picture of newspaper mulch. If you go under approved synthetics and look under mulch, you will specifically see newspaper as being listed as an allowed synthetic. Another example of an allowed synthetic is plastic mulch. And there's a lot of things that are allowed and not allowed, and there's sometimes a lot of like restriction or annotations. And for example, if you're going to use plastic mulch in annual vegetable production, you just need to make sure it's pulled out of the soil every year. And then for non-synthetic, so naturally occurring materials, they are allowed unless specifically not allowed or have certain use restrictions. And so this picture of the brown dust here is a picture of tobacco dust, which it's a non-synthetic, but it's not allowed to be used as a pesticide in organic production. And then diatomaceous earth, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with using in our garden. This is allowed in food processing, but it's only allowed in food processing as a filtering agent, which I think it filters the cloudiness out of some fruit juices. So that's the only specific use for diatomaceous earth in food production. And then, not to get too tricky, and I'll circle back to this, but within organic products, there's a small percentage of non-organic products that can be used. And if someone is going to use a non-organic ingredient or processing aid, the three things that they absolutely cannot have are, they can't be made with excluded methods, which means no genetically modified organisms, so nothing that's made with GMOs. Ionizing radiation, which is used for mainly killing bacteria, microbes that could be on food. That is not allowed. There's a host of different issues with that, but what do I say with that? Sorry, I got stuck there. I'm gonna move on. Sorry for ionizing radiation, which is basically no irradiated food. And I put this little symbol here. This is a Radura symbol, and basically all food for the FDA that has been irradiated needs to have this symbol on it. So maybe you see it out in the grocery store with like tropical fruit and stuff. It's a little controversial, but again, not allowed in organics. And then the third one is sewage sludge, also known as biosolids. This is the byproduct of all our poop at water treatment plants. And on one hand, let's see, biosolids / sewage sludge isn't allowed because basically anyone can release almost whatever they want into the waste stream, and therefore there are unknown risks with food and water supplies with these biosolids because they often contain heavy metals and man-made chemicals, and we don't really know what's in them. And at water treatment facilities, there are ways to like kill microbes and pathogens that exist within biosolids and be able to break it down. But what we don't know about sewage sludge is that if those forever chemicals like the PFAS are still in sewage sludge, and we don't know how it is going to contaminate the soil, the people, the plants, and so it's just a big unknown. And the freaky thing about sewage sludge is that about 50% of all sewage sludge is actually applied to cropland. And it's because it's a free or low cost fertilizer for farmers to use. And if sewage sludge doesn't go into farmlands, I think it goes to landfill. And I think it also goes into like other types of compost bags. So either way, it's not allowed in organic farming because again, we don't know what kind of materials are in there, and we don't want any of those unknowns to be in our food. Okay, does anyone have any questions so far?
Hi, Paige. Yeah, there are a few. So Stephen was asking if there is kind of a connection between the NOSB and permaculture, because a lot of the things you had mentioned sounded kind of similar. And I also wanted you to just maybe touch on that, if that organization is fully volunteer led.
That's a good question. According to my notes, it is volunteer led,
That's
but
fascinating.
yeah, I can go back and look, but I do know this gentleman who is like involved with my training for organic inspecting, that he was a rancher and a grain grower, and on top of his full-time job as a farmer, he was also volunteering on the board. And so I think it's just a lot of passionate people who believe in the organic label and want to be involved. But you know what, I will look into it after this, and if I find any other information, I will email it. And then with permaculture, I don't know if there's a lot of direct connections in that sense, but kind of once I get into like the crop, kind of like the crop regulations and stuff, I think you'll see more connections between the regulations and permaculture.
Right.
And then also at the end, there's a resource of a book I wanted to share that like I'm sure will resonate with a lot of folks that are into permaculture. Because again, like so much of this goes back to soil health and having it feel alive and like all the bacterial life and all that. And so I think it'll be connected, but nothing official with permaculture.
Great. Peggy also wondered about having had conversations with growers that she's met at farmers markets that talk about how they're not allowed to use the term organic because they're not certified, and that they don't certify because the process of certification can be expensive. She's wondering what you think on that issue.
I wanted to just add a question that many sellers at farmers market will tell me that they follow all the organic practices, but they just can't use the label.
Right. Yeah, and again, just because it's going back to like it is a federally regulated term, and using it without being certified could be considered fraud in that sense. But since I have been doing inspecting, I totally understand why farmers don't want to do it. It is just in terms of paperwork, it's another job. It's another part-time job, because before, when you could just buy seeds, sow them, put them in the ground and harvest and sell them, you can do all of that without needing to keep records. But to be an organic farmer, you need to keep track of everything from the seeds that you're buying. And if you aren't buying certified organic seed, you need to look at 3 different seed sources to make sure you are getting organic. Then you need to show the exact date seeds were sown, when they were put into the field, when they were harvested, how much, how they were sold, and lot numbers. So the record keeping alone, I can see that being like a big barrier to entry for people not wanting to get into organics, because it's a lot of work on top of farming, and I can see why. And so I think it's for growers that are selling directly to consumers who can tell that story and really be present and represent their farm and really describe their practices. Maybe paying the extra money to be certified isn't necessary. But I think for more farms that maybe aren't selling direct to consumer, when they are selling to retail stores or distributors, like some people do just want to look for the organic logo or the organic certification and don't want to ask questions after that. But I totally understand why, and definitely support folks that are using organic practices and don't want to be certified.
Yeah. When you mentioned plastic mulch, are you talking about landscape fabric? Are you talking about silage tarp? Can you kind of give us an understanding of plastic mulch?
Yeah, that's a good question. More just like landscape fabric, mostly for weed suppression.
Great. And one more question about sewage sludge, and if that consists of anything that would be going down a toilet.
That is my understanding. So it's anything that anyone puts into the waste stream that gets separated out.
All right. Those are our questions for now, Paige. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, and I know it's a lot to take in. So please, any and all questions are welcome. Okay, and so next I'm going to talk about the organic certification process. There are 3 categories for organic certification. There's crops, livestock, and handling, also known as processing. Handling and processing are basically anyone who makes a packaged food product. But I'm only really going to speak to crops and handling because that's what I know. I have one slide on livestock, which kind of highlights the big picture rules for raising organic animals and animal products. But again, I can't speak to too much of it, but organic livestock management is kind of one of those current hot topics with organic. So I'm gonna try to touch on it as best I can later on. Okay. And so first I'm gonna talk about crops. And I'm gonna show slides for my 3 favorite regulations for crops, which I think really speak to the heart of organic certification and the original intent of the organic program. And so we have right here about soil fertility and crop nutrient management. And it says that producers must select and implement tillage and cultivation practices that maintain or improve physical, chemical, biological condition of the soil and minimize erosion. And so this is basically saying farmers have to be present with their soil. They have to know what's out there and they have to be respecting it. And so when I go out and I'm looking at farms, it's kind of looking at the soil with the farmer, assessing the condition of the soil, asking if they're getting soil tests, what kind of inputs they're using, and just kind of the overall state of their farm. And sometimes I'll run into a lot of people that will be really proud about, like, I got this land 5 years ago, the organic matter content was very low, but since we've been doing organic, it's now like greatly increased. And so it's really nice to hear those types of stories and know that like this is such a foundational piece of growing food. And so the second one we have, the second of my favorite rules about soil fertility. And then a producer must manage crop nutrients and soil fertility through rotations. So which I'm sure I've heard you all, there's a lot of master gardeners on here. So I'm sure everybody knows about crop rotations, that you're not growing the same crops in the same beds over and over again. And it, like, depending on the size of your farm, sometimes you'll have like an annual rotation, or I know there's a lot of big farmers out there with heavy duty crop rotations that are like 5-year rotations that they're going all around their farm. So again, making sure different plants are putting in and taking out different nutrients for the soil. Farms must also use cover crops, which I'm sure you all know a lot about. Cover crops are crops grown to put for like the intent of putting nutrients back in the soil. And for example, like legumes are a big cover crop because they put nitrogen back into the soil. And then the other one for soil health is plant and animal material. So green waste, green compost, and animal manure compost. And again, it's this cycling of nutrients back into the soil that like you're not just taking from the soil, that like what you are taking, you're putting back in. And again, thinking about the overall health of your farm and how it relates to the land and everything around it. And my third favorite of the crop regulations are about soil fertility and again, crop nutrients, which a producer must manage plant and animal materials to maintain or improve soil organic matter content in a way that does not contribute to the contamination of crops, soil, or water by plant nutrients, pathogenic organisms, heavy metals, or residues of prohibited substances. And so again, this goes back to like where your farm is and how you fit into your local ecosystems. And I'm sure like we've all read about the pollution that happens from people over fertilizing their land and leaching nitrogen into the water, into the ground supply. And so here with organic farmers, like you need to be conscious of what you are putting into the land and how it runs off and affects the surrounding land and waterways. And one of the more specific rules for organic farming is that if you want to use specific micronutrients like potassium, calcium, phosphorus, anything like that, you need to have a documented deficiency of those micronutrients before you can apply any micronutrients, because we want to be able to see that you're not just blanketly spreading these, micronutrients that you think you need, but you actually don't need. There needs to be a justified use of these inputs before you use them, because again, just wanting to make sure everything stays in balance. And then I guess kind of going on with that, because it's like with conventional farming, it's like product in, product out. And I was once talking to a vineyard manager he manages organic and conventional grapes. And so for organic, he needs to be more involved with the soil health and the soil test, and kind of be more in touch with like how the vineyards are. But he says when he works with the conventional grape growers, they work with their certified, I can't remember the term right now, their certified agrochemical person, and they just prescribe like all these different inputs and micronutrients, kind of looking at soil tests, but not so much looking at the soil, and just kind of blanketly using materials. Whereas for organics, you really want to know that like if there is a deficiency, if you aren't able to address it through cover crops, crop rotation, and soil health, then that's when you can go and use the add-ons or use any other inputs. And so what I have here, I don't want to jump too much into these other rules. I'm just going to put out some highlights that I think are interesting that you all might also find interesting. For organics, the words co-mingling and contamination are really big. And co-mingling means how are you preventing organic products from touching conventional products? And so in the US, you can be a farmer, you can have two different farms, you can have an organic, you can have a conventional, you can buy, you can grow both. So if you're going to grow both, how do you keep them from coming in contact and getting confused with each other? And I think what's interesting about this rule is that I believe in the EU, you're not allowed to have parallel production. So if you're going to be an organic farm, you need to be an organic farm. And here we allow both. Borders and buffer zones, which just basically is, if you're an organic farm in a sea of conventional farms, how are you protecting your organic crops from your conventional neighbors when they're applying products? So wanting to make sure, say you're not harvesting the first 2 rows or selling it as organic, or you have some type of rows, windrows up to help kind of contain the spread. Seeds and planting stock. It's best to buy organic seeds and planting stock, but if it's unavailable, you need to show that you are searching for organic sources for those. But as long as you have them under organic management, it's okay to buy non-organic seed. And then we kind of talked about crop rotations. And then what I like to say about crop pest, weed, and disease management is that you are allowed to use materials to address pest issues or weed issues, but they have to be approved materials. And also you need to demonstrate that before you've used these materials that you've tried all the physical, mechanical, and other barrier methods before you resort to pest control materials or weed suppressants. And then I wanted to talk about land requirements. This section didn't really fit in neatly anywhere else, but I wanted to talk about, there's like a barrier to organic farming. It's a lot for a conventional farm to change to organic, and part of it has to do with this 3-year transition period where prohibited materials can't be applied for 3 years to land. And I think a lot of the certifying bodies have recognized this and are now coming up with certified transitional logos to show people that they are in the process of becoming organic certified, because once you're conventional and you're transitioning to organic, you're not yet getting the premium price that organic gets compared to conventional for certain products. And it's a steep learning curve to go from conventional to organic. And so creating this label to help give more of a financial incentive to folks to transition to organic. And then for livestock, again, this is one I can't speak to too much about, but there are rules about the origin of livestock, where they're born, how they're raised, I think chickens have to be raised their whole life under organic management. For dairy, I think it's like a year from when you milk them to sell organic milk, they need to be under organic management. And then there's rules about healthcare and vaccines and living conditions in the pasture practice. And I'm going to come back to these rules because they'll tie in a little bit more with kind of like the current state of organics. So I'm going to leave that there for now and then jump to handlers. So anyone who makes organic products, or the whole range of any food production, can be certified organic. There's 4 different categories for organic labels. You can have the 100% organic label, which is basically kind of reserved for raw ingredients that haven't had any processing or other materials. There is a catch for 100% organic, where salt and water can be used, because salt and water don't count towards the percentage of organic. The term organic regular for food processing, not 100%, is that 95% or more ingredients are certified organic. The extra 5% is for, it's more like smaller ingredients like pectin, or sometimes you can't find a certified organic spice, and so you still want to make an organic product. So there's a 5% that can be non-organic. And again, those non-organic ingredients must meet the big 3 that we talked about earlier about the GMO, radiation, and sewage sludge. And then there's a made with organic. So if someone's between 70 and 90% organic ingredients, then they can use it. And these are just, again, like the times that you can use the word organic. Handlers, and this is the rule which talks about if a certain ingredient isn't commercially available in organic form, it's allowed to be used in organic food production. And again, co-mingling and contamination is making sure all food handlers have a way to separate, because there's a lot of food facilities that will make both organic and non-organic products. So how are you keeping those separate from the conventional? And then, so for handlers, basically, when I'm going out inspecting handlers, just making sure that the ingredients they're buying and using in their products are coming from the certified organic suppliers. And the overall rules of organic are, you need to keep records for everything, which goes back to, again, why some people don't pursue organics, because it is a lot of record keeping and traceability. And then just going back to like organic inspectors and what I'm doing now, and thinking back to how organic started, and it was farmers inspecting farmers, and it was a lot more casual, and now the industry has grown a lot and it's a lot different. And I recently inspected a gentleman who's been around since CCOF was certifying people in the early 80s, and I asked him what the biggest difference was, and he said it's the paperwork. So it's a lot different now, but it's still again, wanting to formalize everything, and so much today about food safety as well as about traceability. And kind of the one thing as an organic inspector, you're not allowed to make recommendations. All you can do is cite the rules, but you can't ever say like, oh, it'd be great if you use this cover crop or did this kind of crop rotation. And then this is just more about when I go out and inspecting, the biggest parts of the organic inspection are doing an audit trail and trace back. So making sure when a farm sells something, you can trace it back all the way to the field it was harvested or to the date it was seeded. And then you also do a mass balance to show, does the amount they produce match how much they're able to produce? So if they're growing, I guess, pistachios, did how much they sell last year match the amount of acres that they have available to grow pistachios on? And same thing with handlers. Are the amount of ingredients they're buying matching what is being used in their recipes? And so just making sure someone's not making more product than organic ingredients they're buying. And then I just want to make sure I get to the current stuff because I see the time is going by. Fun facts about organic certificates: they never expire, but you need to be inspected annually for them to be current. And your organic certificate will always show your certification dates and for when it's current, and then also for what products. and parcels you are certified for. And so it just lists, like, if you're an organic vegetable farmer, it'll list all the different vegetables or fruit that you are certified to grow. I've lost my picture. And also, when you're buying an organic packaged food product, it must always say who they are certified by, which ingredients are the certified organic ingredients, and it's always optional to use the USDA seal or the certifier's logo. And so I'm sure you're very familiar with this. These are the 3 approved organic seals that are on packaged food. And these are all the different certifier logos that can also be on packaged food. And you don't have to use any, you can use both. But if you do want to use both, you just have to make sure that the certifier's logo is not displayed more prominently than the USDA logo. And as a consumer, if you all are ever curious about a farm you think is organic or wondering if they are organic, you can go to the USDA Integrity database to look up any organic farm around the world. And I took this screenshot just from the homepage of the Integrity database. And as you can see, they have farms in Ukraine, Mexico, and so all around the world, you can check someone's current organic certificate.
Paige, that actually intersects with the question we have about the verification of imported fruits and vegetables and being organic.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's related to one of my slides coming up.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, because organic fraud is the big one. So I will get to that one. That's the third in this next section. Okay. So what's happening in organics now, and since the organic label first started, and again from like hippie beginnings to where we are now. So in 2017, the National Organic Standards Boards approved hydroponic growing methods for organic certification. And this is a really big deal because, as you can see, this looks nothing like about being in the soil or being part of an ecosystem and giving back, kind of putting farm resources back into the land. And I go back to this talking about biodiversity, biological cycles, and minimal use of off-farm inputs. And if you go back to what a hydroponic at a farm looks like, it's not any of those things. So it's very controversial because this is where people think that organic means the absence of prohibited materials. So in that sense, yes, hydroponics, as long as you're using approved materials, okay. But again, it doesn't fit in with this the bigger original intent of organic farming. And so that's why there's different add-on labels that kind of address this. And also, interestingly, Canada, EU, they don't see hydroponic farming as being organic. So if you are an organic, hydroponic farmer, you can't sell your organic produce to Canada because they don't recognize hydroponic as being organic farming. Other changes that have happened, so since the organic livestock rules first went into place, since then they've had people kind of changing the rules, like big business has kind of reinterpreted what it means to raise an animal on an organic farm. And it used to be that an organic farm, a cow could live its whole life on pasture on the one organic farm, but these kind of bigger businesses out in the desert are interpreting those rules to being, well, if they buy an organic cow from someone else and then move them to here where they are under organic management for a year, that still counts. And there's also a certain number of days that animals have to be on pasture. And I think it's a minimum of 120 days, but it's also based on where you live. And so if you live in a place where they do have access to pasture more days of the year, they need to be out there. But I think there's some businesses that interpret it well as, well, it says 120 days and we'll just do that minimum. And so there were proposed rules to change this. For a number of years, they were building up these rules, but in 2018, they got struck down. And so now we're still in the same spot we are. And so that's why there's also add-on labels for animal products, because some people want to see higher standards for organic animal products. And going to the question that came up, in 2020, the USDA proposed some more rules to tighten up the organic supply chain. in terms of uncertified handlers, and this is to address organic fraud. Because I've even seen this where you have a company that's importing based in the US, they're buying from somewhere abroad, the invoices or everything inbound here says organic, all the invoices abroad say organic, but when you get the shipping manifest or the documents that are coming between the two, like on a what is it, just like either like the official government documentation, there's nothing on there that says organic. And so the USDA is looking into tightening the rules that need to show the organic product throughout the supply chain being explicitly written on these documents. And also right now, uncertified handlers, like not all handlers and food distributors need to be organic certified, and so don't need to follow the same rules. And so they're changing the rules so that all uncertified handlers, so anyone who like distributes, buys and sells and receives organic product, will also need to be certified organic product, meaning that they'll also be subject to audit trails and mass balance, making sure again that they're not buying or selling more than they're buying, and also have like the traceability in their supply chain. But these proposed changes got pushed back. I'm told they're supposed to happen later this year. We'll see. But again, at least there's some hope that folks are trying to address fraud within the organics. Oh, sorry, let me go back.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yes, please. I was going to ask.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks for answering the question about the imported fruit, by the way. Waste management here in Alameda County says their compost is derived from the contents of our green bins here in our neighborhoods, that it's organic and OMRI certified. How exactly do they verify that?
That's a good question. Yeah, because I know when people are getting municipal compost, it does need to be certified, and there are some that are certified and some that are not. And I'm sorry, I don't have any more information on that, but it is a good question. And it's an important question because I was out inspecting a gentleman in Palo Alto, and he had used municipal compost that was an approved material, but there was something in there, and I forget what he had a suspicion it was, but there was something in there that like severely affected his crops.
Yikes.
And so I think that's the tricky thing, that like I think a lot of folks do want to, like farmers do want to use municipal compost, but I think it's like the unknowns and the unpredictability of what can be in there. And I've also heard sometimes there can be a lot of glass and plastic. But as to how it gets OMRI certified, because that's also a whole another part of the material section, is needing these kind of like verification bodies like OMRI, who approves materials used for organic production. And so that's a good question, but yeah, I'm sorry I don't know more on that one.
That's okay. Georgiana has put in some links to what OMRI does, if anybody wants to look at
great.
that. And I have one more question from Stephen, and this is really for everyone on this call. He's asking if I want to find organic veggie starts. He's having some difficulty finding the actual starts. My suggestion was to purchase organic seed and start from seed. But if you're looking for starts, if anyone has other suggestions other than Montclair Nursery in Oakland, which Renee gave a suggestion of, please add them to the chat. It'll just inform everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have a slide for that. I have a run resource. There's a local organic plant start person in Oakland, and so I'll get to that slide and we'll highlight it.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, and then all right, so kind of naming those three current issues that some people see within the organic movement. There has been the growth of add-on labels, which I'm not sure if you folks are very familiar with them. There are already so many different food labels between non-GMO or gluten-free or all that. These I'm going to talk about are specific to, again, people who want to show that their food is maybe going beyond the organic certification. So we have the Real Organic Project. It's started by farmers who are organic, and they are definitely in response to hydroponics being certified organic, and same with the livestock rules. They want to see the USDA do more in terms of like enforcing the original intent of the organic standards. Highly recommend checking them out. They have a really great podcast, make really great videos, have a lot of great resources, are very passionate about like the true organic farming, which really is on the importance of the soil and land health. It was primarily started on the East Coast, so maybe we don't see as many West Coast farmers with this, but I do have a resource with a locally certified Real Organic Project farm. The Regenerative Organic Alliance, which the term regenerative, I feel like is very controversial. Unlike organic, regenerative is not federally regulated. Anybody can use their term regenerative. Some people, I think, see regenerative as meaning beyond organic, that you're doing more than the organic standards. Some people think regenerative means conventional farmers can use it to describe their no-till practices because they don't need to till because they're using herbicides and things like that. So again, anyone can kind of use this term. And so right now it's here for the taking. And so Dr. Bronner's in Patagonia got together to do this add-on certification for regenerative organic. And what I like about this, which I feel like sometimes the organic label is missing, is the social justice piece and how basically the human component of the food system, like farm workers, equality and things like that. And so it's a neat label. I haven't seen it out and about too much, but I know CCOF does offer this as an add-on label in addition to organic. So I recommend checking it out. Land to market is another add-on label that kind of goes back to the livestock rules and wanting to show that animals were raised responsibly on land and are not just degrading the land, but really is like adding value to the land. And again, this is probably for animal products. And then if you haven't heard, you can now get certified. It's not technically organic, but you can get organic cannabis. Recently, the state of California started a certification program for comparable to organic cannabis. And it's called comparable to organic because again, organic federally regulated, can't use it for cannabis, but the OCal program started to ensure that you can buy organic cannabis, which I think is super important because there's a lot of funky stuff that can be used to produce cannabis. And so it's nice that the organic option is out there for folks. And I actually got to do my first organic cannabis inspection, and it was very surreal and really interesting. And I was very happy to see it and be a part of it. It was the first person I'd ever inspected. And the funny thing about that inspection was at the end, they're like, "Oh, do you medicate?" And I was like, "No, no, thank you." And they're like, "No, here, take some." And I was like, "No, as your inspector, I'm not allowed to take gifts because as an inspector, yeah, no gifts, don't want to compromise your integrity." And so I declined a second time, and they were like, "Oh, you're the first inspector who's declined a product." I was like, "Oh, it's surprising." So between different city and state health officials, I think a lot of people are excited that organic cannabis is out in the world. So given kind of what's happened with organics and what's happening now, kind of what's next, and kind of in putting this presentation together and reading more about like what farmers, like kind of in the beginning of the organic farming movement compared to where we are today, I've just heard a lot about organic not being this static thing. And then I just left a link here to a video from Paul Mueller at Full Belly talking to the Real Organic Project, just saying we simply can't expect the movement to go in the right direction all the time. And so even though the organic standards, some people are interpreting them differently, they're still so much good that comes out of organic farming, the organic movement. And so just wanting to like encourage everyone to still like really be paying attention to like how your food is grown, like who it's coming from, how it was grown, where and when, and just still like really paying attention. Because even if something is certified organic, are you getting it from someone who's really treating the soil well, or are you getting it from someone who's just kind of like barely scraping by on the organic standards? And then the big part of organics when it first got started was about community. And I was listening to a talk about a gentleman who says like the one thing he feels like him and his fellow like founders of the organic movement missed was like really stressing the community aspect of food and organic food. And so that means of like knowing who grows your food, or buying it from like a local food source, a local grocer, or being a part of a CSA, and just kind of really being in touch so that you know who's growing your food and where it's coming from and the land that it's grown on. And here, just to kind of for being engaged, I've left my favorite kind of resources in terms of like policy, or for finding farms that align with the type of growing practices you want to see. CCOF, in addition to being a certifier, they also have a foundation that helps educate people about organics and helps advocate for policy on the state and national level. Community Alliance of Family Farms also does a lot of great policy work for farmers. And same with Kitchen Table Advisors. They work with a lot of folks to gain land access, develop their businesses, and to just connect with more eaters. And these are also some great CCOF local farms that I feel like this group might be interested in. Cloverfield Farm in El Sobrante, if you haven't been, a very special place. They're a you-pick vegetable farm, so it's kind of like if anyone just invited people into their backyard and you can pick any herbs and kale, and I think they're you-pick Fridays and the weekends. There's a couple local organic avocado growers, which to me feels so special since most avocados are grown, you know, a broader like Central Coast. Sunol Ag Park. There's a number of different small farms out there, and as part of the lease of the of the ag park, all farmers must use organic practices, even if they're not certified. So appreciate what the folks are doing out there. And then to go back to the question, Casanoff Growers in Oakland, they grow certified organic plant starts, and I heard they have really great and unique tomato starts. And I don't know if they have a website, but if you just look them up, I think on Yelp, you'll be able to find more information. And this is like a totally different talk about organics and the environment and health and all of that good stuff about why good food is important. And I just wanted to share this resource that I found really informative. I just wanted to share with you what I learned. It's What's Your Food Ate by David Montgomery and Ann Bilkley. And it's basically talking about how soil health is health, and how you farm affects the soil, affects the plant, which affects us. And so just talking about since like the beginning of the introduction of like agrochemicals and tillage, how it's really depleted the soil, and how to have nutritious food, we need nutritious soil. And so it's going back to the importance of soil. And the overall, there's a lot of great takeaways from the book, but the greatest takeaway that I wanted to share today that kind of really ties in with organic farming is that the more complex the soil is that your food comes from, and then whereas they use regenerative/organic, and basically using those terms to mean cover crops, crop rotation, crop diversity, really just kind of all the different natural techniques to really feed this soil and the microbes and the mycorrhizal fungi networks. The more you can keep those intact, the healthier the soil, the healthier the plant. And I didn't even really today get to touch on no and low till, but in addition to regenerative organic farming, if you can find folks that are doing no or low till, which means kind of like minimal disturbance of the soil, because you want to keep those fungi networks together and soil health together. So the healthier soil you're able to get your food from, the healthier the food's going to be, and the healthier you're going to be. And that's it. Thank you all so much. And if anyone else has any other questions, you can ask them now. I'm also free after this, and it was a real treat. And I hope you guys learn more than you ever wanted to know about the organic food label. I hope you feel like you have more faith or feel inspired to buy organics. And again, just to feel good about like your place in terms of being a consumer. And I know a bunch of gardeners and people who care about this health of the soil and the health of the plants and people. And it was a treat to be able to speak with you all.
Thanks, Paige. I have a couple more questions. Peggy's asking about if you have a thought on if USDA organic regulations is more or less strict than CCOF.
It's all it's the same. So like the rules that kind of govern overall organics, like CCOF is like implementing those rules, and the certifiers like CCOF are evaluated by the USDA for how well the certifiers are kind of like assessing and implementing those rules. So it's like one and the same, but it does get tricky because some people will criticize certifiers like CCOF for even certifying a hydroponic farm to begin with. And so it gets a little sticky, but CCOF is also following what the National Organic Standards Board recommends in terms of changes to the organic program, if that makes sense.
For sure. I want to pass off to everyone here that there's been tons of great suggestions about organic starts in the chat, so feel free to review that before you leave the presentation and maybe save it for further review. Those are all the questions that I see right now. I'll pass it off to Kristen.
Okay, thank you so much, Paige. That was awesome. I know I wrote down a lot of notes to pass on to some of my students and just for my own information. I was wondering if you have any resources for folks who would like to get certified to be an inspector. How difficult is that to do?
Oh, I highly recommend. It's been a wonderful job. It's a super interesting job. I would recommend, let's see. So for the IOIA, that's the place where you'd want to get certified. And so I'd recommend looking at a certifier's website to see if they are hiring and what the job description would be. And I know CCOF is a big one. Oregon Tilth, they also have inspectors in California, so they're another certifier I would check out. And then a lot of the requirements to be an inspector are that you are IOIA certified as an inspector. So I would check out IOIA to sign up for one of their certification courses. And then from there, maybe going on to apply to a certifier.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much. And I saw that there was an ask about the recording. The recording will be available on our website. Just want to share an event that we have coming up with Alameda Backyard Growers here. We have our annual plant swap is coming up, and that's going to be on Sunday, October 2nd at 2 p.m. And there is a registration. Let's see. I have a link to that if anybody wants to click on that. So I put that in the chat. And yeah, so save the date. That's our third annual plant swap coming up Sunday, October 2nd, 2 p.m. Once you register, then you are able to see where. Yes, Sarah?
We aren't seeing your slide.
Oh, are you seeing my baby?
No, you're seeing
okay.
Kristen Smeal has started screen sharing. Double click.
Hold on a second.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be. Try this. Is it there?
No, there it is. Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So yeah, once you register, then more information will come to you about where that location will be, but it is in a place in Alameda. So only 50 registrations available. And I think we've already, I think 10 people have already registered. And if you'd like to support our work and our programs, your donations enable us to bring you an array of high quality programs. We are a 501c3. And if you'd like to, you can just take a picture of the QR code. That will take you to our page. I'll pause for a second. And keep in touch. We have a Facebook page, we have a YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to our mailing list. And all of our information from this talk and previous talks will be available on the AlamidaBackyardGrowers.org website. So thank you for coming. And thank you so much,
Thank you.
Paige. Yeah, that was wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you guys.
Okay. Right.